Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mormonish. I'm Rebecca, and I may not have my normal co-host, Landon, with me, but I do have one of my co-hosts from the Mormon Newscast, Bill Reel. How are you today, Bill?
I'm doing good, Rebecca. How are you?
Yeah, it's weird not having RFM here. I think we have someone, can I say better? We have the amazing Teresa Hobbs with us too. How are you, Teresa?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
This is awesome. Yeah, I wanted to have these guys on Mormonish Podcast to discuss kind of this journey and project that Bill has been working on. I heard about it for the first time just on the newscast last week, and I thought, this is amazing. This project that Bill and Teresa are kind of embarking on, and it really is something that can benefit the entire post-Mormon community and really anybody. So I just wanted to have them on so we can discuss this. So let's just start with Bill telling us, what is it that you have been working on for the past year, kind of under wraps? Like, I don't think a lot of people knew you were doing this, did they?
Yeah, so for a long time, obviously, I've been in this space since 2012, helping people make sense of the mess. I always say the messiness of Mormonism. And one of the things that I've done as an amateur is sit down with people who are in the middle of a faith crisis and have conversations with them that attempt to help them navigate that and move through that more smoothly, to have the resources, to know they're not alone. And I met Teresa last October through Facebook dating, and we've been dating ever since. It's almost a year now. In fact, I think it's a year today, our first conversation that we had.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That's kind of a milestone there. Yeah. And I remember meeting Teresa, meeting you kind of early on at I think, was it Ronald's Little Factory?
Heretic.
Some kind of movie. It was Heretic.
It was Heretic.
It was
yeah.
a screening of Heretic. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. And we all hit it off. You're just so wonderful. And we're really happy that you're here and you're part of this group. So this is fantastic.
So when her and I met, I mean, she is a trauma recovery coach. She's been doing that for several years. And it's a space that I'm naturally helping out in any way on some amateur level. And I've always wanted to be a coach. So sometime, I don't know if it was late October, maybe early November of last year, I signed up for a 1-year course to get my trauma coach certification. And so just a few weeks ago, I was notified that finally happened, that I had completed the course. It took a year to do. And so I'm a certified trauma recovery coach. I'm still waiting for the certificate to come in the mail, but they said it's on the way. And that gives me the chance now to partner up with my girlfriend, Teresa, to do this, have these kinds of conversations. And one of the things that we're jumping right off to do is to offer a support group. This is something, she'll talk at length about what she does, but it really has been her example. She's phenomenal at helping people who have chronic pain and chronic fatigue and have been dealing with things that are an outward expression of inner trauma that's happened to them over the course of their life. And she's been such a resource as I've gone through this course. And a lot of these things I sort of knew naturally, things that you learn in fields like meditation, or, we talk often about the book, The Body Keeps the Score.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a great opportunity to combine having a knowledge of what it means to go through the faith deconstruction journey in Mormonism, and what it means for people who show up with traumatic responses or traumatic pain or effects in their body or mind because of what's happened to them. And I think, the three of us can certainly recognize that when you go through this journey in Mormonism, a lot of things you didn't ask for happen to you. And you endure those things thinking that this is the lens you see life through. This is the way that the world is built. This is the way religion is. This is the one true church. This is how we get back to God. In the meantime, you don't realize all the little mechanisms that this system uses to manipulate you, to nudge you to be what it wants you to be, to get you to fit in, to scare you into doing things its way. And what that leads to is tons of things happening to you that end up being harmful and change your life going forward, so that your decisions and the way you show up in your world are different from that point forward. And so I'm just here now with some credentials behind my name, but always serving in this space and wanting to help people navigate their faith transition journeys.
Wow, it's fantastic. And as soon as I heard you talk about this, I thought of a personal example. I've talked before, about how my oldest son stepped away from Mormonism when he was 15. So it was before other people were doing it, right? He's 30 now. And, he was a teenager. He was in the heart of Utah County, and he was vilified. Anytime any other kid's parents thought the kid was doing something wrong, they say, oh, it must be because you're hanging out with him, because he doesn't go to church. He just struggled and continues to struggle. I said it was fine for him to step away from the church when I saw how traumatized he was and what anxiety he had, but I never filled that void with any other kind of faith or spiritual journey. I just kind of left him. It's one of my huge regrets. And to this day, he, suffers from what I recognize as religious trauma. I was finally able to get him into some kind of counseling. It was an online scenario. And he was going, a couple times, meeting with the therapist. And I finally said, well, how's it going? And he goes, well, I keep talking about the church and the religion and how I was hurt. And she said to me, just stop talking about your church. Let's talk about what's really bothering you. And, right there, I knew that person that he had been linked up to online counseling didn't understand religious trauma, because that is his trauma. That's everything. His physical problems, his emotional problems, his mental problems. Some people it doesn't affect. This kid, it really affected. So yeah, that therapy was not worth anything to him because the therapist did not understand religious trauma. So what you guys are doing is invaluable, because I think some people don't even understand the length or the width of the effect of religious trauma. So did you, Teresa, did you deal with trauma in general in your work, or specifically religious trauma? Or tell us about your background a little bit, kind of your journey becoming a therapist and what you dealt with.
Yeah. So first of all, I have to clarify, I am a trauma recovery coach.
Perfect.
So I can't
I know we all say therapist,
but people interchange it.
I know. And therapists are like, no, you
Yeah.
have to say what I am, or it can be.
Yeah.
Yes. So trauma coach is what we refer to you guys as. Perfect.
There we go. So I have, my coaching journey basically came from my experience. So my lived experience really informs how I show up as a coach and what things that I work with. I did have religious trauma. Like early on, I was a member of the church and stepped away when I was 20. So similar to your son, I had a lot of anxiety and a lot of things I didn't understand, and it was horrible. And I never had a name for it, and kind of plugged on through life. And then eventually, back in 2015, I'd had a lot of chronic health issues throughout that, that manifested in my body. And then I collapsed. I had a nervous system shut down and became bedbound and housebound with severe chronic fatigue syndrome and all kinds of crazy symptoms. And I started my journey of trying to figure out how to heal. And, you start with all the physical stuff because you think it's some physical thing. But eventually I realized there was so much that was being driven by trauma. And so I explored more of that and found all kinds of different somatic-based tools to sort of help me heal. And then I realized that that's what I wanted to do for other people, because it's such a misunderstood experience. People have something physical that happens to them, or, and they think it's just physical, and they don't understand that there's such a connection between the mind and the body. And so it's really fascinating stuff. And so many people are affected. I can't like, it's funny. Bill and I, when we first started talking, he was like, oh, this is really unusual. There aren't that many people that experience this. And I was like, Bill, there are so many people who have this kind of thing. And suddenly Bill's friends started talking to me, people he'd known for a long time. They're like, oh yeah, I deal with that. And I was like, see, it's so common. And so it's really helpful for people. Basically what I do, I'm a trauma recovery coach. My main focus is on helping people with the chronic illness stuff. So if they have patterns of trauma that show up in their body in lots of different ways. Again, it could even anxiety is a somatic expression of trauma. Depression is a somatic expression of trauma. And so what I do with people is I help them understand the mechanisms of that. Because when you understand why something's happening, you have a better sense of agency on how you can sort of support that. And so the psychoeducation aspect is huge for people. And then I help people understand, different tools, how it affects their body and how they can work with that. And that in and of itself helps people shift the narrative about it, which naturally we have to go through this process of making meaning of what happened to us, right? And, at first our meaning could be kind of founded in this idea that we're victimized and we feel really helpless in our story. And as we start to reclaim connection with our body, reclaim our boundaries, get a sense of our own true authenticity, these are all things that happen through the process of healing from trauma. We start to feel more empowered, and we lose that, like, our story changes. We have a different arc of our story, and we start to feel like more empowered and like we can move through our life with more agency. And it's a really beautiful thing to watch people do that. Yeah, so that's kind of how I approach it and what I do.
Wow. I feel like this podcast is meant to be, because I feel like I'm going to connect my son to you. I'm not kidding. He has a lot of physical, that are you psychosomatic? Why are you saying this is wrong? You're a kid, that kind of stuff. And I never put it together that it really could be trauma based. In our The Good Book Club, we read The Body Keeps the Score, and discussing that again, it was something I just wasn't super aware of. I think if I ever had any reaction like that to trauma from church, I just dismissed it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just don't think about it until you recognize it. Even yesterday, there's a meme going around. It's looks like your phone is ringing, and then it's President Oaks on the call. It's just a funny thing. They're making a joke about, oh, are you getting a call for a calling? That popped up on my phone. I had what I now recognize as an anxiety response. Someone from the church is calling me. It brought back all these memories of, oh my God, it's the executive secretary. What do they want me to do? I mean, it was so funny. I was like, oh my God, is this really still affecting me that I'm having this reaction? It's clearly a joke. It's President Oaks on my phone, but it brought back all of that trauma. And that's a minor trauma, but for me, that was huge. The phone call, the bishop's calling you in, and you feel that, response. So it's a real thing, but I agree with you that people don't recognize it until they start looking in. So I'm not kidding. I'm going to talk to you afterwards about this, because it can be debilitating for life for some people, and I see this in my son, kind of just a failure to be able to advance past the trauma, past the things that, the physical things as a result of trauma, and this is a young person. Imagine somebody with decades, and you don't even have to imagine, these are the people you're talking to, of this kind of trauma inside that they may not even recognize is from that. So this is incredible. Tell me about the idea of starting an actual, this is going to be an online, people are, joining, signing up, and it's a group. It's kind of a group. It's not, you guys do one-on-one, but this particular thing that's starting, I'm talking about it. You guys talk about it. What is this that you guys have come up with?
Yeah. So I'll just say I have a support group for chronic illness. And that's a group where people can come where, nobody understands what that is, and they have a space to talk about it. So, I'm new to this community, by the way, the post-Mormon space. I didn't know this really existed. And so engaging with Bill and starting to see like all the people that are hungry for connection, that are hungry for that community that they lost, it's a really big thing. And so I was like, well, actually Bill was the one who kind of first put it out there. I was really scared. I was like, I don't know. There was a moment that I was kind of like, I had to take some time to really digest like what this would look like and get brave enough. But anyway, after Bill got his certification, we thought this was a good time. And so it's really a space for people to come where they can share their experience, where they can have community and connection. And Bill and I are going to be essentially facilitators that hold a really safe space. So when you have a space like this, you want to make sure that everybody feels safe in it. So we'll be bringing trauma-informed principles to the space where we give clear guidelines about how we want to share. This isn't going to be a space where people come to just vent their spleen and, talk about all the things in a negative way. And we can hold space for people's sacred stories, but not in a way that's going to dysregulate the group. So it's really going to be a safe container for people. And I think also people get to share in this space where they are in their own journeys, right? Because everybody has a different phase of their deconstruction that they're in. And so people can share what's been helpful for them, and we'll be able to kind of resource each other, which I think will be really cool. Anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I think that there's value in sitting around with a group. There's so many times I've been in a group of people, new people, and just their opportunity to tell their story and to say what happened to them has value. But this is going to go far beyond that. One is that if everybody is just venting, we don't get anywhere. And so as Teresa's pointing to, I think this is an opportunity to help people slow down and not necessarily what happened to them, but what happened to them. What is it causing to come up in their body, in their mind? How are they being? We always use the word triggered, and in those moments where we get to make new decisions and we start to live our life differently is where we slow down enough to notice the thing that's changed, and rather than react the way that we've always reacted, because a parent does something that they've always done, a kid does something they've always done, and you feel something inside, and so you suddenly just feel yourself escalate and you react a certain way. And it can be anxiety, as you guys mentioned. It can be showing up in unhealthy ways yourself, responding to something. And our goal is to help people slow down enough that they can recognize that, oh, I felt something, and just by noticing it, I have a new opportunity in this moment to show up differently than I have the million times before that. And so you're pointing to this idea that we sometimes discount that people will show up certain ways that are really big. And again, chronic, we'll take the chronic pain, for instance. And we say, okay, this person has chronic pain. Let's go to the doctor. Let's get that solved. But in reality, as you just pointed out, you noticed when that phone call came in that you felt a ton of anxiety.
I did. I was surprised.
Yeah. I used to think I was invincible to the church. Like I was the guy who could stand up to it no matter what and protect the 1,000 people behind me, and I'll just take the blunt of it. And then one day at church, the whole entire Sunday school class, there were multiple things that happened that just shut me down, that were not going to let me have my authentic voice be part of this space. And I remember leaving church with my heart racing. I remember just my hands shaking. And I've shared that story numerous times, but it's to point out that when things happen to us, we are affected. And some of those things might be just 10 minutes of anxiety. It might be just a half hour or a day of having a headache or a hand shaking. But sometimes it shows up in a lifetime of not being able to have the health or mental mind reaction that you want in a situation. And so rather than just giving people a chance to vent, this is going to be a place where people learn tools, get resources, and have the community and shared experience that others can nod their head and go, yeah, I've experienced that too. But the entire room to feed off of each other and have chances to grow, so that when you wake up tomorrow morning, you have an opportunity in some small way to do something different that feels like progress and growth to you, rather than showing up in the same patterns that you have because of the things that happen to you.
Yeah, I think recognizing that you're having a reaction or that's happening to you, it sounds easy, but that's not. I think that's the hardest step. I read just the most heartbreaking post on Faithful social media yesterday about somebody, a young couple who had gone to the temple. The husband had gone first. They'd had a year of temple prep, which we all know means nothing, right? You learn nothing. And the husband had gone and he'd come home really shaken, which made, I guess they were fiancés at this point, the woman very upset too. She wrote paragraph after paragraph of her experience, almost just minute by minute in the temple. It's exactly what you described. My head was pounding. I was crying. I was shaking. People were trying to help me. I shut down. I disassociated. I mean, I was reading it going, yeah, that's kind of what happened to me. I've talked about my temple experiences. Some people aren't affected that way. I was. But, her question at the end was, what can I do? How can I go back? And the faithful commenters were trying to say, yeah, that happened to me, but you'll be fine, But oh my God, this woman, it was a full on breakdown in the temple, crying, disassociating, just the things that were going on. And she, I'm sure going forward, is not going to recognize that's what it was. She'll probably say it was Satan, or, she'll probably be lulled by her friends to think, yeah, that's what happens to everybody. You'll be fine. So when you get on the other side of Mormonism and you recognize these moments where you are being physically, emotionally, spiritually harmed by what's happening, you personally, for whatever reason, whatever your reaction is, I think there's part of it where you go, how did I let that happen to myself? I ask myself that, how did I keep going to the temple when every time I had nightmares about the temple, full on nightmares? This poster said the same thing. She was having nightmares. I have nightmares about very many things, but the temple nightmares when I was still going early on were really there. And I think it's hard to recognize, that you're a person that's suffering trauma. Because a lot of us do feel I'm pretty tough. I don't go there. I don't do that. And then, like you say, Bill, something will hit you. But then you don't have the tools. You don't know what to do or how to help yourself. The fact that you guys, go ahead.
It's probably noteworthy. When we think of the word trauma, we often think of the thing that happened.
Good point.
But as you're pointing out, because that leads to, if you and I went through something similar and I was able to just move on from it and not be that affected, I get to judge you and say, why don't you just, deal with it and move on like the rest of us did? And I think it's noteworthy to say that trauma can be big things. It can be little things. It can be a one-time only. It can be a pattern of things. It really is how it registers inside the person. And every one of us human beings are so diverse, so different. Somebody once said, you can think about it like the way you look and the way I look, that I am so different looking on the outside than you are. But if we could see how people are structured internally, it is so much more foreign and alien. You are so much more different internally than I am. And so how people react to things is going to vary from human being to human being. I remember a thing, and I didn't, for years and years, I sort of ignored that this had happened to me, but I had a traumatic event happen in first grade. And in first grade, I've gone through the rest of my life not thinking twice about it, really. And then it was sitting in therapy a couple of years ago where I was revealing to the therapist this constant behavior and motivation inside that was leading to me showing up not my best self in the world. And as he kept digging into that, eventually what comes out is something happened to me in the first grade that has shaped how I've responded to any moment that approached that feeling of shame or of judgment. And we ought to recognize that every one of us have had severe things happen to us. And I don't mean severe as in the worst 5 things in the world. Everybody's experienced that, but rather that something has happened to you and your body has processed that in such a way that you're inhibited from living your best life because you get triggered in certain moments, because you feel anxiety around things that someone else doesn't, because you react in an unhealthy way, maybe harshly or sternly towards others, because some moment that approached something near what happened to you when you were 10 or when you were 15, it was so similar that those feelings rise up in you and you respond that unhealthy way when you're 45 years old. Trauma isn't the thing that happened to you. It's how your body responds.
Wow. No, that's very important to bring up because you're right. Different people react different ways. And I'll talk about my oldest son again. I've told the story before. He was so traumatized by Bishop's interviews, that were invasive and asking him sexual questions, traumatized to the point of tears. I came home one Sunday and found him, crying over it as a 15-year-old. And that's when I said, I kind of made that decision, church or mental health of child. Instantly went mental health of child. But my only answer was just, oh, you stay home. I didn't really help him with any of the rest of it because I didn't understand it. But, then I have other kids that I was very protective over Bishop's interviews with, and they're like, whatever. They ask weird questions, whatever, just rolled right off of them. Right. But the one to this day still traumatized over those kinds of things. And you're right. Childhood trauma. I mean, I'll admit I used to be more like, whatever, that's therapy, that's this. But, when I think about my church anxiety, which I've had my entire life, I think about an early experience I had. Oh my gosh. I think I was also maybe kindergarten, but we'd gone to visit my grandparents and it was their primary program. We were there on Sunday and my parents said, these songs, go up there. I'm visiting the ward, right? I'm already a super shy, super inhibited child, right? Raised very, orthodox. And I'm like, no, I mean, I got hysterical as they kept telling me to go on the stand. They had to take me out to the car and put me in the car and leave me there because I couldn't even speak, Now another kid would go, I know those songs, I'll go up there. But to me, and when I look at those things, I realize I've always had church anxiety, performance anxiety, which somebody might say that's ironic. You have a podcast, but I'm comfortable in this space. I was never comfortable in that space. And, I've told that story before to people and they're like, oh, you were little, but that was a big deal. I mean, I got hysterical. I had a full-on panic attack being told I needed to go up on the stand and sing those songs, so it's real. I'm right there with you. Your thoughts, Teresa?
I was just going to say, like, everyone's born with a different nervous system, and we still don't know fully like what happens in the developmental phase in utero that helps predispose our nervous system to be a certain level of sensitivity, right? And so we do have different levels of sensitivity, and we have different ways that we learn to adapt, that our nervous system learns to adapt to perception of threat. And also, I mean, somebody was talking about this in one of the books I was reading, and they were saying how if basically, if you had a parent who was like really thought snakes were really cool, and the first time you were introduced to a snake, your parent picked it up and said, "Oh, isn't this amazing?" and showed you the snake and how wonderful it was, your association with that snake is now that it's no big deal. You know what I mean? Whereas if you have a parent who's like, "Oh my God, the snake," then every time you see the snake, you're going to have this association. And it was like that for me because my mom was always really kind to spiders. She told me that spiders were the most amazing things. I am not afraid of spiders, but so many people are. It's a normal fear. So, how we are told about the world, it affects our perception of the world, which then, affects how we respond to different things. And so there's so many different layers of things that will affect how our nervous system functions and how we respond to perceived threats. And essentially what trauma is it's being stuck in a cycle of protection, right? So something happens, and if you're highly sensitive, it could be something that somebody else might think is small, but you could, that one thing could get you stuck in a state of a cycle of protection over and over and over again, so that you just stay braced and protected about all the things in the world. And that's essentially what we do when we're trying to help people move through trauma, is you're trying to repattern that response. You're trying to invite the nervous system essentially to let go of its protective bracing response. And when it does that, it has an impact on your physiology as well. And you start to trust that you can feel safe in the world again.
Wow, it's so big. It's so much bigger, I think, than most of us think about it. We try to brush things off. We try to just get past it. Do you think generational trauma in the church plays into this with people? I mean, my mom was a kind of very nervous church person. And I really think that I know you guys will never believe this, but the last talk I agreed to give in the LDS church was in 1987. And that was at college. And it was because I thought, oh, maybe I'll get some dates out of it, right? If I get up there and I give a talk. And I refused to give, I was so traumatized and nervous at church. I would agree to give the prayer in sacrament meeting because I didn't know how to say no. And I've said this before, I would write something down. I would listen to a devotional. I would copy down the prayer, really tiny writing, and I would read it. This is as a grown adult. This is maybe 10 years ago, because I was so afraid of just freaking out and forgetting what I was supposed to say. I didn't recognize it as trauma. I just thought I was really shy, and I thought I was really a very nervous person. I have never borne my testimony. I have never raised my hand in a class to make a comment, just because I thought I was really shy and just couldn't do this. So then what happened is I started running a youth theater program. And when we'd have our kickoff meeting, we'd have 200 parents in a gym, and I'd be up front with my microphone telling everybody what we were going to do. And one day I was like, why do I have no problem talking to 200 freaking people, being super excited, super energized? And yet when I walked through the doors of the church, I realized I was having fight or flight. I realized every time I was in that freaking building, I was in a panic, and I was like this, and I was so silent. And that's when I realized, it's not me, it's that place. It's my response to it. It's the topics that are being spoken there. As soon as I stepped away, I grabbed a microphone, right? In a space that I'm comfortable with. But you guys, you would not recognize me if you were to just be on a fly on the wall at my LDS church, because I was just that little person that could never speak. It was trauma, but I never knew that. So how many people do you think are like that? They don't recognize that it's fight or flight or panic.
Oh yeah. And also you mentioned generational trauma. And so you said your mom was a sort of an anxious churchgoer.
Very much.
So you would have she's modeling this behavior for you that you pick up on as a child, and you're from infancy, basically.
Yeah.
And that is informing your nervous system, how to respond to that place. Because was your mom nervous or anxious all the time, or
Yeah,
mostly
she was. She was just one of those people that really
Yeah.
like to follow rules. So it was like, we don't do that. We don't go there. What will the neighbors think? We better dress just right. You better sit quietly. It was that, I do this because, I didn't realize I was like that as a child. My aunts, who were very different, later told me, we were so worried about what you were when you were a kid, Rebecca, because you would never unfold your arms. Even when you were visiting our homes or out in public, you were always like this. I feel like I'm in a therapy session, but do you know what I mean? It was all this, you don't recognize that. And I didn't remember that about myself, but I do remember always being told we're reverent, we're quiet, we fold our arms, we don't make noise, and so I think it was fight or flight. So yeah. And there's bigger generational trauma than just that, but I think that's a huge part of it. And how do you even recognize that? You just talk to people about their past, or how does one recognize that?
Psychoeducation, there's different books you can read that you'll read about stories in a book and you'll be like, oh my God, that's me. And then you'll have the understanding to explain why that's happening. And it just, all of a sudden, all the pieces will come together and you will feel heard and seen and understood. And it's a beautiful way to release shame, to release this feeling of like, oh, there's something wrong with me. I'm broken. When you understand that the responses that you are having they actually make sense. They are there because your system has been trying so hard to protect you, then it really, sometimes that's all people need, to just be like, wow, I'm not crazy. And so much of what I do as a coach is actually to help people understand you're not wrong. Like they'll tell me like, oh, I've got this big problem and I have like, my life's a mess. And sometimes I'll just be like, well, why don't we just sit back for a minute and just, what if we can just look at it and not judge it? Like, what if it's not wrong? What you've experienced, or, how your nervous system has tried to protect you, or how your brain has tried to protect you. What if that's not wrong? And what if it makes total sense? And just having that explanation sometimes can take so much pressure off of feeling like you're broken or wrong, or I don't know, like it's really cool. And, we have a dog barking. I'm so sorry.
I have a dog barking too. I said, I told these guys when we started, I don't ever stop. I hate to edit. So we're going to work through dog barking, kids interrupting.
You're okay. I'll step away really quick and just go yell at him. So he'll be quiet.
Bring your dog on. We love the dogs. The only thing I do stop for is like a wardrobe malfunction. That would be something we don't want. But no, see now, Mike, did you hear that? My dog just barked. Probably heard your dog. What the heck?
That's funny. What kind of dog do you have?
It's funny that you should mention that. My son that I'm discussing, he's not in a living situation where he can keep his dogs. So I have taken his dogs. So Alice is, a little Chihuahua mix, and she's just a ball buster. She is intense, which is crazy. So no, yeah. I just think we'll just keep talking a little while Bill's gone getting the dog. But yeah, I think what you said, it's not wrong. But in an organization like the LDS Church or any other high demand, high control religion, so many things are wrong, are considered wrong, even though you're just living your life, or maybe considered you're not doing what your neighbors are doing. You're not on the covenant path. Your family doesn't look like others' families. There are some, I think, very direct lanes that you're supposed to stay in. And when you don't, I keep talking about my oldest son, but he just said, I don't believe this. I'm stepping away. I said, fine. And he would just talk to his friends very matter-of-factly about, I think this about the church and that, and they'd go, wow, that makes sense. Then I'd have a knock on my door from that friend's parent. Your son is leading my son away, always. I can't even tell you how many times that happened, and this was earlier on, early 2000s. So, now I don't think that happens so much. Families know it's not just one. But, he was very vilified. So I think in the LDS Church, there's right and there's wrong. What your family's supposed to look like, what your behavior is supposed to be, what you're supposed to be. And it's very clearly delineated. So, there's a lot. I can see why people feel my problem is a big problem. I'm wrong. I'm doing something wrong. And you internalize all of that.
Yeah. And it was interesting because when you were talking about how when you were was it a community playhouse?
It was through an elementary school, but I started this program myself, and I did it for 20 years. Actually, it's still running. I'm kind of emeritus, but it's true. When those people, I had no problem talking to, even though they were part of my church community. A lot of them, they were people I would see at church, but in this venue, it was my comfort zone, and we were there to talk about something else, children's theater, and how, what the year would look like and what we were doing. So it was a big aha moment to me that I was comfortable there, but so uncomfortable in the other place.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say theater in general, there aren't rules for that. It's about creativity and expression.
That is a great point.
And openness. So I don't know if that informed that at all, but that's really interesting.
I think it did. And it was interesting because we would have a lot of LDS kids in our theater program, and some of them were kind of the black sheep, you know what I mean? The black sheep of school or church. And they were the ones that were the leads because they were the most creative, which was amazing. So, and then sadly, like I said, this is the heart of Utah County. We had, I think, 2 of all my years in the 20 years, kids that took their own life over living in, a very locked down, closed society in that area. And they were a different kind of a person, so completely heartbreaking, and that's the dark side of not being able to find therapy or a group or people, or knowing even that you need help or that there is help. I think that's part of it too. So what do you think, Bill? Teresa and I have been going back and forth. Weigh in on anything we've said.
Yeah. So generational trauma. When I was in 9th grade, my science teacher, Mr. Blakeman, had the weirdest gait and walk. It was, in my mind, I never asked him. No one else ever asked him. I didn't know what was the cause of it, but I assumed it was either some sort of physical handicap that he was born with, or he was in some sort of accident, or he'd had some sort of something happen. And it was the strangest walk. And then I go into the 10th grade, and his son comes into the high school as a freshman, and he walks the exact same way. And I'm like, oh, isn't that strange? And I think, no, it isn't. Me and my dad walk the same way. We walk on the inside of our feet. And if you watch me walk, you're like, why does Bill walk like that? Well, I walk like that because my dad walks like that. There's also science that says when a mother incurs some sort of traumatic event, they've done studies that the children born before and after that traumatic event handle events that are similar in very distinctly different ways. And there is statistical significance to how they show up. Meaning that, and you can go online, you can type this up. If you look up something like trauma is stored in DNA, there'll be lots of science research articles that show that from generation to generation, and it's, by the way, it's evolutionarily beneficial to us for this to happen, because as our species 100,000 years ago encountered a changing environment and different kinds of circumstances, it was always going to be better if the next generation had some slight little edge that prompted them to react quicker in ways to get away or to fight those things that we encounter that feel threatening or dangerous. And so they've shown that in our DNA, on some degree of some level, the things that happened to our parents and our parents' parents all the way back, we have something from that. And so when you say generational trauma, like science says that's absolutely true. And, if your parents lived in really hard times, I had a grandfather who grew up in a very poor family and was a product of the Great Depression. And my dad also grew up very poor. And so I come into this world not really feeling like my family was ever super poor. And even when we were for a short time, I just didn't sense that. Like I was fine and felt like I had a very happy home, that things were safe and my needs were provided for, no problem. I never felt like we were struggling to make it. But I grew up into an adult, and I'm very resource protective. Mm-hmm. When my friends would come over to my house as a teenager, they'd be like, hey, let's make something here. Because I'd make something at their house, or mm-hmm. they would provide food to me when I was at their home. But when they're in my home, I'm like shutting the cupboards. I'm like, no, we can't touch anything. There was just something innate in me that said, I've got to protect the resources around me. We definitely come to situations, a product of what's not only happened to us, but what's happened to our parents and what's happened to our great-great-grandfather, those things are real. And so sometimes you have to break family patterns or generational patterns that show up, whether it's an avoidant attachment style. I think that's one of the things that can happen from generation to generation. If your mom was super anxious, it's easy for you to feel some of that anxiety just naturally because you're her kid. So I think those are things that we have to be aware of when we're helping people. Is it may not just be the things that they've encountered. It may be things that past generations in their family line have encountered.
Yeah, I think recognizing that is the first step, and it's difficult. Sometimes you have to make a real effort to recognize that you're doing things. Like I read something right about the time where I officially stepped away from the church, and it said your brain works really hard to keep you comfortable and doing the thing that's comfortable, kind of a nothing changes if nothing changes, right? And you almost have to, in a simplistic way, fight your brain on that, and I find myself doing that now on the other side of, always trying to do what was right in the church. I'm like, okay, my first reaction is to say, oh, I could never do that. Even if it's something simple, I would never, I couldn't, like a podcast, right? It was actually my co-host Landon who talked me into it, because my first reaction, I was posting a lot. I was really interested in, looking at things and delving into post-Mormonism and scholarship and the news. And Landon's like, we've been doing our book club forever. Why don't we just, do something, start something? And my first reaction was, I can't speak. I could never do that. But I honestly remembered, yeah, but you know what? My brain is working to just keep me at status quo. What if I just disobeyed my brain and said, oh yeah, I am going to do it? And that's what I did. But for me, it's like a conscious, and I do this all the time. My first reaction is always, I can't, I shouldn't, I probably wouldn't. People will look at it this way, or, I'm a people pleaser, right? So I'm always trying to think of what everybody else will think of what I'm doing. And I've had to consciously talk myself out of things or into things, trying to break out of that pattern. So, and some people can do that on their own. For bigger things, I think you definitely need, somebody to talk to. Here's a question I would ask you, and I hear this all the time as a post-Mormon, somebody who's a podcaster. You guys in that space, it's to your benefit to keep people crazy, right? To keep people wallowing in, to tell them they have trauma, to tell them that they, do you guys hear this? I hear this, that we have this desire for a super negative outcome for people. And I always try to say, absolutely not. My goal, anybody listening to my podcast, would be move on. Don't listen anymore. Get healed, find out you're not crazy, and go live your life. Never watch my podcast again. Unsubscribe, right? But no, we're always accused of that. What do either of you, starting with Teresa, think about that idea that we're just trying to keep people in this soup of, just this nightmare kind of?
Yeah. I mean, obviously it would be better for my pocketbook if people just stayed with me like as a client forever, but that's not what I want. I want people to move on. I want people to get better. And I actually think Bill can speak to this better, because this even came up last night. So I don't know if you want to share like what we.
Yeah, I will. So let me start off by saying this. First off, we're helping people who were traumatized by a system that tied itself to one's family relationships. In other words, let's say you begin to investigate the claims of your faith and you begin to step away. Your loved ones, your spouse, your parents, your children have been taught to choose the church over you. Mm-hmm. So now you're on the outside of the temple while they're still getting married on the inside. The system has labeled you a lazy learner. The system has labeled you the tares among the wheat, or the chaff among the wheat. It's called you apostates. It's asked its members, its believers, to shun you if you begin to ask critical questions. The leaders teach that any kind of criticism is not welcome here. All we're trying to do is counter that. And how can you counter that unless you help someone? Number one, you validate that they aren't alone. You validate that they're not crazy. You validate that a lot of people have been through this, and you continually offer the resources and support that counter the magnitude of what has bumped into them. We went out to dinner last night with a couple. We'd never met them before. I'll just really briefly say I took a re-interest in a hobby called geocaching, where you have little scavenger hunts for things that are hidden. And I hid some things near my home here in Cedar City. And this person found one of the geocaches and messaged me on the geocaching app and said, are you the Bill Reel? Like, this would be a double bonus if I found a geocache and it was put here by this podcaster that I listened to. And so I just reached out and said, yeah, that's me. And, if you ever want to catch dinner or something. So we went out to dinner with them last night. And they were expressing this very thing, that they had explored deconstructing Mormonism, that he really quickly made sense that he had been lied to, that the system wasn't true, and he was able to disconnect super fast. And he looks at me and he goes, "I'm really sorry, but I don't listen to you." And I said, "That's the best thing I ever wanted to hear. I want to hear from people that you've gotten whatever you needed to be able to process this in a way that you know you're not crazy, you know you're not alone, you've got the tools and resources to go live your best life, and off you go." And she expressed the opposite. She says, "I still need to hang on to things. I still need to keep my ear to the ground. I still need to know what's happening, and I still need to sort of I feel the urge to still make sense of this." And for that person, there's going to continually be resources and content creators and coaches and therapists who are willing to acknowledge that that person still needs something from it. There's no part of me that goes, "Oh, if I could just keep 100,000 people listening to my stuff all the time, forever and ever." No, my best world, and I told this to them last night, I said, my best world is if you get what you need, you got enough to process it, you feel good about living your best life, and you move on and do it. And now, instead of spending hours listening to some post-Mormon content creator, you're out reading books, you're out carrying out your hobby, you're going dancing with your partner, you're going and doing the fun things of life and not feeling any need to look back. So I think for the believers or apologists who say we are just trying to trap people in something, those people don't want to recognize or validate how much the church hurt somebody, and in how many ways they hurt them, and in how divisive they were with that person in their valued relationships in their life. And once you recognize that, it makes sense that you're going to need something of a similar magnitude to counter it.
Yeah, no, that's big. I think about, the tragedy in Michigan that just happened. And we talked about this on the newscast a little bit. Post-Mormons, people in the post-Mormon world, especially podcasters, some influencers, they were thrown under the bus, I think, on the faithful side a lot, saying, your rhetoric. I personally had somebody comment that on a short that I put out, just informational, that said, "Don't you think that your rhetoric, what you're doing, causes, this kind of harm?" I actually had it sent to me by a family member, saying, "Look, don't you think?" And, I was able to say back to the family member, "Well, that's interesting you would say that, because also in this last week, I had a good high school friend. She and her husband finally made the decision to step away from the church. And they expressed to me the things that I do, those like me, help them, exactly what you said, not feel crazy. No, they're not alone." And, I was naming people that this family member knew. I said, also, this other person, from the ward growing up, has stepped away and reached out to me out of the blue and said, "Oh my gosh, what you guys all do, you're a lifesaver." That kind of family member didn't really answer me back on that. But, I'm trying to point out there's this whole other side to it, that we're not the villains. And what you guys are doing is even more important than, those of us that just talk or have podcasts. That's really important too. But to actually interact with people, let them, work through things with you guys who have been there. I mean, like I said, when we first started here on this podcast, I explained how my son went to a therapist who said, "Church, that's nothing. Tell me what's really wrong." When in my son's case, that is what's really wrong and has been for 15 years, and he can't get past it. It is religious trauma. Do you guys think that now more therapists or coaches are starting to recognize the significance of religious trauma? I mean, I think maybe this is a newer little arena, isn't it? I don't know that. I think maybe people are like my son's therapist who just said, church. To them, maybe church is just, I went once a week, had coffee and donuts. What could be wrong? Is that a good thing? Do you think that more therapists and coaches are starting to understand the significance of this for so many people?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that with more coaches coming into the field, there's more niche types of practices, and people are essentially, it's kind of like me. Like I'm working with people who have my same story. Right. And so as people have learned how to work through their own stuff, they are bringing that out more and highlighting that more. And we also have this amazing, access to, like, I work with people from all over the world. So people,
and not just Mormonism, right? That's the thing. We're not just, we're
Mormonism.
talking about high demand, high control. It's everywhere. It's not just us.
Yes, exactly. And so there's more people who are connecting, and this is also the algorithm, right? What the things that we're interested in then connect you to other things that you're interested in. Then you learn about people who are doing this type of coaching or whatever. So people are starting to find better resources. And I do think the therapeutic model, while it can be really good for a lot of things, they're kind of behind a little bit. And unless people have been educated more recently and they've done extra things around specifically trauma or religious trauma, they're not really going to know as much. So it just depends. I've had a lot of people that have, worked with so many dozens and dozens of therapists and have never gotten the information that I'm telling them. And, that it's really not been helpful to do the typical therapeutic model. And again, not that it's wrong or bad, it has a place, but what we're going to be sort of teaching people is like fundamentally how trauma affects you and how you can sort of unwind it in your system and, find more stability. And there's just so many layers to it. And so I think it's a very different thing. And I think that, things are changing, and people are going to definitely find more of this. This is just one place to find it. So
I want to add something to that. And I want to say something else first. So I know that folks are always listening to me on the believing side or the apologetic side, ready to criticize. So I do want to lay out where I got the certification and what they're calling it. So I just want to note the place that I took this education on is called the School of Trauma-Informed Positive Psychology. And what I got was a somatic trauma-informed coaching and leadership diploma. And they I don't know what this means, but it's a level 7 CMI qualification. And it was only a year long, but it was equivalent to a year of master's degree type work. And so I'll just throw that out there in case anybody on that side wants to criticize that. They at least know where my education came from. But what I want to say to this is I've got a friend, and he was trying to juxtapose the way things were in the 80s versus the way things are today. And he said in the 1980s, when you got molested, you just got on your bike and rode home. We live in a different world today. I look at things like Leah Remini exposing Scientology. I look at Spotlight exposing the Catholic Church and the abuse that happened there. You can go to Netflix and go look at all these TV series on cults, ones that are operating in the modern moment, like Nexium. There's been lots of shows about Mormonism and its unhealthiness. I think we live in a moment where, as a collective culture, we are recognizing that abuse isn't just mom and dad or the uncle or the neighbor down the street. It is systemic. And we are much more willing in 2025 to shine a light on it. I think journalists are much more willing to cover it. I think TV stations or streaming platforms are much more willing to put it in front of everybody. And so I think we are all collectively growing up right now, recognizing that maybe the majority of humans have experienced things that they never should have, rather than, 5% of people are abused. When I learned as a teenager that 33% of women are sexually abused at some point in their life, I was blown away. I thought, no way could that stat be true. And if anything, that stat is an underestimate because of the lack of reporting by people.
It is.
I just want to note in 2025, I think systems are having to begin to account. It's really the reason why Mormonism has changed is the internet, transparency, so many people having access to programs that expose these things. And I think all systems are having to adapt. The Catholic Church has had to adapt. The Boy Scouts of America has had to adapt. I think we're living in a moment where a light is being shined on things more than it's ever been, and unhealthy systems are being forced to change.
Yeah, that's true. And I just want to add one more thing. With that magnifier that's been placed on this, and everybody now understands more of what trauma is, there are still people new to this. But part of what can happen that's a negative with that is that people can get stuck in the identity of traumatization. And so that's great. And we want people to understand like what's happened to them and why it makes sense that they're going through things that they're going through. But people also need tools to learn how to move past it. And so sometimes you can go to a traditional therapist and you can just talk in circles and talk in circles about all the things that happened to you. It doesn't help you. That's not going to help you move through your trauma. You need to understand how to work with your nervous system, how to understand why it's happened to you, all the different access to agency you have, not just that you have it. And so sometimes I find people get fragilized by, you know, all of the commentary out there on trauma, and people live in that identity, and that's not what I want people that I work with to get stuck in. So I really, really work hard on trying to get people to move beyond that. First, we identify it, we acknowledge it, we validate it, and then I help people learn how to move past it. So, and that's a really important part of it.
Oh, fragilized. I had not heard that word, but that absolutely describes it. You know, and I see that on the Faithful Mormon side with people that are just circling and circling on porn addiction. My husband is addicted to porn. My husband, you know, and they are just, you know, those self-help groups. We've all podcasted about them. You know, I don't know that they have the most healthy outcome in mind. And a lot of people that have left the church and did facilitate those groups say it's not. It really is just a circling around and around and around and living in your trauma, taking on, you know, it does seem to be this, you know, seems to be a lot of women who are consumed with, you know, their husband's morality or whatever, you know, which is all relative. So yeah, human beings, I guess, you know, you get in a group that supports what you're doing like that, and then you're just kind of trapped. So it's really good that you guys are saying that's not our goal at all. We want people to move on through, and that's exactly right. So
yeah, in fact, if people are interested in the support group because they want a place where they can just tell their trauma stories and everybody can just put an arm around each other and go, oh, that's sad that happened, that probably isn't the place. This will certainly be validating, but I think at the end of the day, if we're not helping you slow down, see how it's affecting you, and giving you tools that help you to show up differently, so that rather than going, oh, look at all the things that happened to us, instead we go, look at the progress we're making, look at the change that's happening, look at the shifts that are going on. Like I said, I don't think the group is going to be for you if you're looking for the former, but if you're looking for the latter, then I think this is a great place to not only find community, but to find growth and resources.
And so you guys are dedicated and motivated to have people to do the work. And, you know, it may be possible that somebody might show up who's the only way they've ever been able to process it is just to tell the story over and over. And so maybe if they do come and that's how they operate, and then they're nudged into let's do work, you know, and others are nudging them, that could be a good thing too, because you may not realize that that's you and your identity now is your trauma story, you know. I think my son, I know I keep talking about him, but that's my living example that I'm dealing with every day. And, you know, that is his story. That is who he is, you know, and I try a lot of ways. I'm going to talk to you guys after the show about possibly getting him involved in this, because it's hard to move forward. It's hard for people who love somebody in that scenario to know where to send them or what kind of help can help them move out of that. So yeah, this is amazing. Why don't you give us some specific details? We'll include things in the show notes, how somebody can, if they're interested. Your group is starting in about a week, I think, from when we're going to air this. And let us, you know, tell us, are there slots available? How do they sign up? What do they do? What does it look like, you know, online? Just give us some more specific details so people, because I know people listening right now, I know there's interest, and I know that some of you might be going, this could literally save my life. So please tell us how they can connect with you guys.
Yeah, so I'll start off just by saying that I will send you a URL so that you can put it in the show notes.
Okay.
And that'll take you directly to the web page where folks can read about and then register to be part of that group. But I will tell the audience here, the easiest way I can tell you to find it is if you go to awakenandthrive.org. Awaken, and then A-N-D, and then thrive.org. And this is the website for my coaching. And if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see me, and then Teresa. And Teresa has her own website for her coaching too. But if you scroll down a little bit, you'll just see their support group. And if you just click the button, it'll take you to the page that I'm going to share the link with you that'll be in the show notes. So that'll save a step if they go there. But awakenandthrive.org. And we have room for 15 people. I think it's going to be best to keep the groups there. That was Teresa's idea, and I think that's brilliant. We don't want them to be super small. We don't want them to be way big either. I think 15 is going to be a great number. And I think as of right now, we've got 7 or 8 people that are already signed up for it. So there are 7 or 8 more slots to go. Teresa, what would you want to say about this?
Well, that it's going to be every other Tuesday. So it's done as a subscription. So it's a monthly subscription of $60, and that gets you 2 meetings per month, or essentially every other Tuesday. And we'll be meeting at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And yeah, starts on the 21st. So we're super excited.
Yeah. And I was going to add something too. I'm trying to think here. I just forgot. But yeah, the every other Tuesday is $60 too, by the way. I mean, if you go to get a therapist or a coach, it's not a cheap thing. Folks who meet with you to help you deal with your life and the things that have happened, there's a cost to that. It can be expensive. We thought this would be a great way at a really low cost, essentially $30 per group, to have access to people who are trained in these areas, who have an awareness of tools and resources that are going to be helpful to you. And so you, without having to pay the large cost of a therapist or a coach, can access the kind of expertise that a coach brings to this arena, and not have it be overwhelming to your wallet or purse.
Yeah. And I have to say, I mean, I've seen you firsthand in a group setting in action at Sunstone when you and RFM had your little kind of discussion that everybody signed up for, dinner and talk, and I was only there for probably about the first hour, and it wasn't really supposed to be, it wasn't like advertised, come and, let's have some therapeutic conversation, right, with Bill Reel and RFM. But every person that stood up, you could feel, right, their story and where they'd been, and they were sharing, and you guys were interacting, and even that just very limited interaction there, you could just see that it made a difference for people being able to share their story in front of a group of others that had lived almost identical stories, or at least understood, the main focus of what you were saying. So yeah, that night was really interesting. I mean, that just the whole feeling in the room, didn't you think, Bill? I thought it would be more like, oh, you guys are being silly and crazy, and the people are being, crazy in your talk. But boy, it was, I mean, you were there too, Teresa. It was, it definitely had this focus and this feeling that I was like, people really need to get together and to talk. So yeah, that had an impact on me, just being there for that first hour.
I've been in so many situations like that where I'm either part of a fireside or a group discussion, and they're folks that I've never met before. They've been watching the content that I or RFM have put out, and so they're familiar with us. But inevitably, every one of those environments turns into that. Mm-hmm. What people really need in this space is they need a place to talk openly about what they incurred, without it being judged, without them being seen as crazy or feeling like they're alone in it. There certainly is a lot of help, I think, that comes in this space from just being around other people who have been on the same journey. And I think too, when people share experiences, when they make progress from things, something changed in their life and things got better, people gain a lot of hope from hearing the positive experiences of others as well. And so it really does feel like a support group every time we have one of those. And I think this in a large degree will encompass that. But I think this space will be different because it will be a chance for you to learn the tools, different things that'll be helpful to you, that rather than just walking out of there and knowing you weren't feeling just alone, I think you'll walk out of there having something to go forward, and over the next 2 weeks, start to make progress in your life and sense some improvement.
Oh, that's excellent. Any final thoughts from you, Teresa? I'm so glad that we got to talk about this. I think this is going to be so helpful to so many people, already helpful to me, thinking about how I can help my son, or just recognizing some things in me that are trauma responses that I didn't know I had, So any final thoughts? This has just been great.
It has been great. And I just want to thank you. What you do is amazing. And we really appreciate you inviting us on here. And I'm just thrilled to see how this goes. And if there is more interest than what we have capacity for, we will start a second group. So just want to put that out there.
Yeah, I feel like you might need that. And then you individually offer a one-on-one kind of a
Yes.
scenario too. And that can all be found on that website because you're right. For some people, a group is good. Other people need to do some more individual work first before they might be ready for the group setting. So that's wonderful. And again, it's just, when you can start on the same page, I just go back to my son and that therapist he tried. They were not on the same page, not through the fault of the therapist. The therapist just didn't have a concept. And I read all the time, like on Post-Mormon Reddit, someone will say, I blew my therapist's mind today. Right? I just vomited everything. And they just sat there and said, whoa, I had no idea, So there is something to be said for everybody starting on the same page, like you're a veteran, you run into a veteran, you're on the same page. There are things that you've experienced that that are unspoken, and then you can start doing the work from there. So I think that's what we're talking about here. So excellent. Well, thank you guys both for being on. This has been amazing. Please, everybody, comment. If you are having trouble finding the URL in the show notes, or you need to know how to get a hold, put it in the comments and one of us will answer back and let you know how to get a hold, because this class is going to be starting up, this group, I think in a week from where we're going to announce this. So it'll be coming up pretty soon. It sounds like it's filling up. So please comment and let us know if you're interested or what else comments you have about the show. Please like and subscribe to Mormonish Podcast. And if you'd like to be made aware when new episodes come out, you can hit the notification bell. If you would like to make a donation to Mormonish Podcast so we can continue to have fantastic guests like Bill and Teresa on, we always have links in the show notes to donor box there too. And we also have our merch store where you can grab something that says Mormonish on it. And just thank you so much again, Bill and Teresa. This has just been, just a really awesome conversation. I'm going to be thinking about this, I think, all day. And I think you guys will too. And we will see you all next time on Mormonish. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.